The Bean Trees by Barbara Kingsolver. Chapter 9 is Meny. Esperanza tried to kill herself. Estefan came to the back door and told me in a quiet voice that she had taken a bottle of baby aspirin. I couldn't really understand why he had come. "Shouldn't you be with her?" I asked. He said she was with Maddie. Maddie had found her almost immediately and rushed her to a clinic she knew of in South Tucson where you didn't have to show papers. I hadn't even thought of this, all the extra complications that must have filled their lives even in times of urgency. Maddie once told me about a migrant lemon picker in Phoenix who lost a thumb in a machine and bled to death because the nearest hospital turned him away. Is she going to be all right? How could he know? But he said yes, that she was. They might or might not have to vacuum her stomach, he explained. He seemed to know the whole story, including the ending, and I began to suspect it was something that had happened before. It was after sunset, and the moon was already up. A fig grew by the back door, an old stubborn tree that was slow to leaf out. The moon threw shadows of fig branches that curled like empty hands across Estefan's face and his chest. Something inside this man was turning inside out. He followed me into the kitchen where I had been cutting up carrots and cubes of cheese for Turtle's lunch tomorrow. To keep my hands from shaking, I pushed the knife carefully through stiff orange carrot flesh against the cutting board. "I don't really know what to say when something like this happens," I told him. "Anything I can think of to talk about seems ridiculous next to a person's life or death." He nodded. "Can I get you something? Did you eat?" I opened the refrigerator door, but he waved it shut. "At least a beer, then," I said. I opened 2 beers and set one on the table in front of him. From my earliest memory, times of crisis seemed to end up with women in the kitchen preparing food for men. "I can see right now that I'm going to do one or two things here," I told Estefan. "Either shove food at you or run off at the mouth. When I get nervous, I fall back on good solid female traditions." "It's okay," he said. "I'm not hungry. So talk." I had never heard him say, "It's okay," before. Restaurant work was corrupting Estefan's perfect English. I took his statement to mean that it was okay to talk about things that weren't especially important, so I did. Luann took the baby over to her mother-in-law's for some kind of a weekend-long reunion, I said, swallowing too much beer. "They still consider her part of the family. But of course she won't go over when Angel's there, so they have to work it all out. But now, of course, it's easier since Angel's left town. It's totally nuts. See, they're Catholic. They don't recognize divorce." I felt my face go red. "I guess you're Catholic too." But he wasn't offended. "More or less," he said. "Catholic by birth." "Did you have any idea she was going to do this?" "No. I don't know." "There's not a thing you could have done anyway, really." I swept the carrot pieces into a plastic bag and put it in the refrigerator. "I knew this kid in high school, Scotty Ritchie. Everybody said Scotty was a genius, mainly because he was real quiet and wore these thick glasses and understood trigonometry. He killed himself on his 16th birthday, just when everybody else was thinking, well, now Scotty will learn to drive and maybe get a car and go out on dates, and that his complexion was bound to clear up and so forth. Bang! They found him dead in a barn with all these electrical wires strung around his neck. In the paper they said it was an accident, but nobody actually believed that. Scotty had done probably 500 different projects with electricity for 4-H. 4-H? It's a club for farm kids, where you raise lambs or make an apron or wire a den lamp out of a bowling pin, things like that. I was never in it. You had to pay. I see. "Do you want to sit in the living room?" I asked him. He followed me into the other room, and I scooted snow boots off the sofa. When Estefan sat down next to me, my heart was bumping so hard I wondered if I was going to have a heart attack. Just what Estefan needed would be another woman falling apart on him. So nobody could understand about Scotty, I said. But the way I see it is, he just didn't have anybody. In our school, there were different groups you would run with, depending on your station in life. There were the town kids whose daddies owned the hardware store or what have you. They were your cheerleaders and your football players. Then there were the hoodlums, the motorcycle types that cut down trees on Halloween. And then there was the rest of us, the poor kids and the farm kids, greasers we were called, or nutters. The main rule was that there was absolutely no mixing. Do you understand what I mean? Yes, he said. In India they have something called the caste system. Members of different castes cannot marry or even eat together. The lowest caste is called the untouchables. But the untouchables can touch each other. Yes, then that's it exactly. The nutters were the bottom of the pile, but we had each other. We all got invited to the prom and everything from inside our own group. But poor Scotty, with his electricity and his trigonometry, he just didn't belong to any group. It was like we were all the animals on Noah's Ark that came in pairs, except of his kind there was only the one. It struck me how foolishly I was chattering about something that was neither here nor there. Mama would call this rattling your teeth. I drank about half my beer without saying another word. Then I said, I could kind of see it with Scotty. But Esperanza has somebody. How could she want to leave you? It's not fair. I realized I was furious with Esperanza. I wondered if he was too, but didn't dare ask. We sat there in the shadowy living room thinking our thoughts. You could hear us swallowing beer. Then, out of the clear blue sky, he said, In Guatemala City, the police use electricity for interrogation. They have something called the telephone, which is an actual telephone of the type they use in the field. It has its own generator operated by a handle. He held up one hand and turned the other one in a circle in front of the palm. A crank? Like the old-fashioned telephones? Operated with a crank, he said. The telephones are made in the United States. What do you mean, they use them for interrogation? Do you mean they question you over the telephone? Estefan seemed annoyed with me. They disconnect the receiver wire and tape the two ends to your body, to sensitive parts. He just stared at me until it hit me like a truck. I felt it in my stomach muscles just the way I did when I realized that for nearly an hour I had been in the presence of Newt Hardbine's corpse. There is this horrible thing staring you in the face, and you're blabbering about bowling pin lamps and 4-H. I'll get us another beer, I said. I went to the kitchen and brought back the rest of the six-pack, carrying it by the plastic rings like a purse. I popped 2 of them open and plumped back down on the sofa, no longer caring what I looked like. The schoolgirl nerves that had possessed me half an hour ago seemed ridiculous now. This was like having a crush on some guy only to find out he's been dating your mother or your math teacher. This man was way beyond me. I don't know exactly how to say this, I said. I thought I'd had a pretty hard life, but I keep finding out that life can be hard in ways I never knew about. I can see that it would be easier not to know, he said. That's not fair. You don't see it all. You think you're the foreigner here, and I'm the American, and I just look the other way while the president or somebody sends down this and that shiploads of telephones to torture people with. But nobody asked my permission, okay? Sometimes I feel like I'm a foreigner, too. I come from a place that's so different from here, you would think you'd step right off the map into some other country where they use dirt for decoration and the national pastime is having babies. People don't look the same, talk the same, nothing. Half the time I have no idea what's going on around me here." A little shadow moved in the doorway, and we both jumped. It was Turtle. "You're a rascal," I said. "You hop back to bed this minute." She took one hop backwards, and both Esteban and I tried not to smile. "This minute," I said, in the meanest voice I could muster. She hopped backwards through the door, clapping her hands one time with each hop. We could hear her hopping and clapping all the way back through the kitchen and into bed. Snowboots jumped onto the back of the sofa and sat behind my neck waiting for something. He made me nervous. "All I am saying is, don't be so sure until you have all the facts," Esteban said. "You cannot know what Esperanza has had to live through." I was confused. He was picking up the middle of a conversation I didn't even know we'd started. "No," I said, "I don't. Or you either." He looked away from me and touched the corners of his eyes, and I knew he was crying in the secret way men feel they have to do. He said something I couldn't hear very well, and a name, Meny. I shoved Snowboots gently away from the back of my neck. "What?" I asked. "Do you remember the day we walked in the desert, and you asked why Esperanza was staring at Turtle, and I told you she looked very much like a child we knew in Guatemala?" I nodded. The child was Meny. I was afraid to understand this. I asked him if he meant that Meny was their daughter, and Esteban said yes, that she was. She was taken in a raid on their neighborhood, in which Esperanza's brother and 2 friends were killed. They were members of Esteban's teachers' union. He told me in what condition they had found the bodies. He wasn't crying as he told me this, and I wasn't either. It's hard to explain. But a certain kind of horror is beyond tears. Tears would be like worrying about watermarks on the furniture when the house is burning down. Meny wasn't killed. She was taken. Try as I would, I couldn't understand this. I was no longer so stupid as to ask why they didn't call the police, but still, I couldn't see why they hadn't at least tried to get her back if they knew the police had taken her, and where. "Don't be upset with me," I said. "I know I'm ignorant. I'm sorry. Just explain it to me." But he wasn't upset. He seemed to get steadier and more patient when he explained things, as if he were teaching a class. "Esperanza and I knew the names of 20 other union members," he said. "The teachers' union did not have open meetings. We worked in cells and communicated by message. Most people knew only 4 other members by name. This is what I am saying. In Guatemala, you are careful. If you want to change something, you can find yourself dead." This was not the, what do you call? The PTA. I understand. 3 members had just been killed, including Esperanza's brother, but 17 were still alive. She and I knew every one of those 17 by name. Can you understand that this made us more useful alive than dead? For us to go after Meny is what they wanted. So they didn't kill her, they just held her? Like, I don't know what. A worm on a goddamn hook? A goddamn hook. He was looking away from me again. Sometimes, after a while, usually, these children are adopted by military or government couples who cannot have children. I felt numb, as if I had taken some drug. "And you picked the lives of those 17 people over getting your daughter back?" I said, "or at least a chance at getting her back?" "What would you do, Taylor?" "I don't know. I hate to say it, but I really don't know. I can't even begin to think about a world where people have to make choices like that." "You live in that world," he said quietly. And I knew this, but I didn't want to. I started to cry then, just tears streaming out all over and no stopping them. Estefan put his arm around me, and I sobbed against his shoulder. The dam had really broken. I was embarrassed. "I'm going to get snot on your clean shirt," I said. "I don't know what it is." "Snot." "Good," I said. There was no way on earth I could explain what I felt. That my whole life had been running along on dumb luck, and I hadn't even noticed. "For me, even bad luck brings good things," I told him finally. "I threw out a rocker arm on my car and I got Turtle. I drove over broken glass on an off-ramp and found Maddie." I crossed my arms tightly over my stomach, trying to stop myself from gulping air. "Do you know, I spent the first half of my life avoiding motherhood and tires, and now I'm counting them as blessings." Turtle showed up in the doorway again. I don't know how long she had been there, but she was looking at me with eyes I hadn't seen on her since that night on the Oklahoma plain. "Come here, Pumpkin," I said. "I'm okay, just sprung a leak, don't you worry. Do you want a drink of water?" She shook her head. "Just want to cuddle a few minutes?" She nodded, and I took her on my lap. Snowboots jumped onto the sofa again. I could feel the weight of him moving slowly across the back and down the other arm, and from there he curled into Estefan's lap. In less than a minute, Turtle was asleep in my arms. When I was a child, I had a set of paper dolls. They were called the Family of Dolls, and each one had a name written on the cardboard base under the feet. Their names were Mom, Dad, Sis, and Junior. I played with those dolls in a desperate, loving way until their paper arms and heads disintegrated. I loved them in spite of the fact that their tight-knit little circle was as far beyond my reach as the football players' and cheerleaders' circles would be in later years. But that night, I looked at the four of us there on the sofa, and my heart hurt, and I thought, in a different world, we could have been the Family of Dolls. Turtle wiggled. "No," she said, before she was even awake. "Yes," I said, "time for bed." I carried her in and tucked her under the sheet, prying her hand off my t-shirt and attaching it to her yellow stuffed bear, which had a pink velvet heart sewed on its chest. "Sleep tight. Don't let the potato bugs bite." "Potato bite," she said. When I came back, Snowboots had moved from Estefan's lap and curled into the little depression where I had been. I sat in the space between them, with my feet tucked under me. I no longer felt self-conscious, though I could feel almost a pull like a flow of warm water at the point where our knees touched. It seems like, if you get to know them well enough, everybody has had something awful happen to them. All this time, I've been moping around because of having the responsibility of Turtle forced on me, and now I feel guilty. That responsibility is terrible if you don't want it. Oh, big deal. The exact same thing happened to about 60% of the girls in my high school, if not the whole world. "If you look at it that way," he said. He was falling asleep. "I guess that's just the way the world has got to go around. If people really gave it full consideration, I mean, like if you could return a baby after 30 days examination like one of those Time Life books, then I figure the entire human species would go extinct in a month's time." "Some people wouldn't send them back," he said. "I would have kept his Meny." His eyes were closed. "Did you get up in the middle of the night to do the feeding and diapering?" "No," he said, smiling a little. "I can't believe I'm even asking you that. Does it hurt you a lot to talk about his Meny?" "At first, but not so much now. What helps me the most is to know her life is going on somewhere, with someone, to know she is growing up." "Sure," I said, but I knew there was another side to this, too, where she was growing up, what they would raise her to be. I thought of Turtle being raised by Virgie Mae Parsons, learning to look down her nose and wear little hats, and then I got it mixed up with police uniforms. A little later I realized I had been asleep. We both rolled in and out of sleep in a friendly way. You can't be nervous if you're sleeping on the same sofa with somebody, I thought, letting your mouth fall open any old way. Snowboots jumped off the sofa. I heard his claws scratch the carpet as he covered up his sins. Why did they call you Nutters? I remember Estefan asking at some point. I thought and thought about it, trying to fight my way out of some dream where Turtle and I were trying to get to the other side of a long, flat field. We had to follow the telephone wires to get to civilization. Nutters, I said finally. Oh, because of walnuts. In the fall, the kids that lived in the country would pick walnuts to earn money for school clothes. Did you have to climb the trees? Estefan amazed me that he would be interested in details like that. No, basically you waited till they fell, and then picked them up off the ground. The worst part was that to get the hulls off, you would have to put them in the road for cars to run over, and then you'd pick the nuts out of the mess. It stained your hands black, and then you were marked. That was the worst part, to go to school with black hands and black fingernails. That was proof positive you were a nutter. But otherwise, you would have no new clothes. Right. So you were damned if you didn't and damned if you did. I guess the ideal thing, I conjectured, half dreaming, would have been to get clothes with good, deep pockets. I meant so that you could hide your hands, but I had a picture in my mind of skirts and trousers with pockets full of pounds and pounds of walnuts. 10 cents a pound is what we got for them. 150 pounds equaled 1 pair of Levi's. Later I woke up again, feeling the pressure of Snowboot's feet walking down my leg, then hearing them thump on the floor. Estefan and I were curled like spoons on the sofa, his knees against the backs of my knees and his left hand on my ribs, just under my breast. When I put my hand on top of his, I could feel my heart beating under his fingers. I thought of Esperanza, her braids on her shoulders, Esperanza staring at the ceiling. She would be lying on a cot somewhere, sweating the poison out of her system. Probably they had given her syrup of ipecac, which makes you keep throwing up until you can feel the sides of your stomach banging together. All of Esperanza's hurts flamed up in my mind, a huge pile of burning things that the world just kept throwing more onto. Somewhere in that pile was a child that looked just like Turtle. I lifted Estefan's hand from my rib cage and kissed his palm. It felt warm. Then I slid off the sofa and went to my own bed. Moonlight was pouring in through the bedroom window like a watery version of my mother's potato soup. Moon soup, I thought, hugging myself under the covers. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a cat yowled like a baby, and somewhere else, closer by, a rooster crowed, even though it was nowhere near daybreak.